I am waiting for the presentation of the Civilian Secretariat, please.
Good morning, Chairperson. I'm not sure if we need to start or should we wait for the Minister to introduce the presentation?
You may start.
Thanks, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Members, Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister and colleagues. From the Civilian Secretariat for Police Service, I have the following members, senior members in attendance. Ms. Ayanda Tongwana, Ms. Itumeleng Ledwaba, Mr. Tumelong Konjwana, who is our CFO, Ms. Dipsi Wechwemang, Ms. Lindy Mjeza, Advocate John Bell, Ms. Neo Matlangu, Ms. Matlam Lebo, and Ms. Florence Matom. The CFO, Mr. Nkonjwana, will do the first part, which is the budget information. Then he will be followed by Ms. Itumeleng Ledwaba, who will do the performance information section. Through you, Chairperson, I will ask the CFO to start.
Thank you.
Start, please.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, honorable members, the Minister of Police and the Deputy Minister of Police, and all other honorable members present, the top management from the Civilian Secretariat, the top management from SAPS, and all present. My name is Tumelong Konjwana, the Chief Financial Officer at the Civilian Secretariat for Police. I'll be presenting the financial information. What I would like to the audience to note is the fact that if you compare the 2022-23 against the 2023-24 financial year budget, there is a general decrease of the budget of the Civilian Secretariat for Police for about 1.2%. That is, the budget is decreasing from 152.3 million to about 150.4. So that is the decrease. This is, if you compare this against the subsequent financial year, which is the 2024-25 financial year, in that instance, there will be an increase of about 3.2% when you compare 2024-25 against 2022-23. In general, when you look at the different programs within the Civilian Secretariat, there is a decrease for the period under review of about 1%, with the exception of the strategic partnership, which has a decrease of about 2.7%. You will note that the administration program decreased from 68.7 to 68.2 million, while the partnership decreased from 27 million to 26.2 million. The legislation and policy development program decreased from 23.3 million to 23.1 million. The civilian oversight monitoring and evaluation program decreased from 33.1 million to about 32.8 million. Looking at the different economic classification, you'll note that the compensation of employees have also decreased by about 2%, which is from 107 million to about 105 million. The goods and services on the other side stayed unchanged at about 39 million. The payment for capital assets has increased from about 5.1 million to about 5.3 million. In general, the transfers and subsidies have just decreased from 129,000 to about 140,000. That will be my presentation, Chair. Thank you. Through you, I can hand over to Itumeleng Ledwaba, who will be presenting the performance information. I thank you. Handing over to you, Tumileng.
Chair, am I audible?
Are you there? I think the presentation is over.
You're breaking.
Chair, am I audible now?
You're audible now.
Okay, my apologies for that, Chair and honorable members. Good morning once more, Chair and honorable members, and all protocol observed. I just wanted, I was starting the presentation by indicating that what is being presented before you today is a culmination of true strategic planning sessions that we held as a management team, one in October 2022 and the other in January 2023, wherein also our provincial counterparts participated, and we all provided inputs with respect to the particular programmatic focus areas. We also took into account the outcomes of the MTEF process with National Treasury, and also the assessment and recommendations from the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation with respect to our draft APP. Chair, so on slide 3, in terms of our mandate, so our mandate as derived from section 208 of the Constitution remains unchanged, Chair, so I will go straight to slide 4. Similarly, with the institutional policies and strategies for the 5-year planning period, these remain unchanged with the exception of the inclusion of the ICVPS Integrated Crime and Violence Prevention Strategy, which was approved by Cabinet in March last year for implementation by all the relevant stakeholders across all the spheres of government. Chair, I'm now on slide 5, which are the relevant court rulings. In terms of the court rulings, Chair, so these court rulings remain relevant for the remainder of the 5-year period, and the outcomes of the court rulings have been taken into account in terms of the drafting of our bills for the medium-term period. On slide 5, Chair, with respect to our strategic focus, slide 6 rather, with respect to our strategic focus, so our planning orientation is informed in the department by the priorities that are outlined in the National Development Plan, similarly as was outlined by SAPS, Priority 6 of the revised MTSF, Chapters 2 and 3 of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence, the SONA pronouncements by the President, and other frameworks of government. We're also guided, Chair, by the priorities that are pronounced by the Minister of Police, who of late, Minister has been vocal about improving station-level policing and accountability, reducing the DNA backlog, and also empowering the community policing forums to enable them to play their role more effectively. Since the approval of the ICVPS by Cabinet, Minister has also placed emphasis on the need for us to facilitate implementation of the ICVPS, and this has translated into one of our key outputs, Chair, for 2023-24. Furthermore, the priorities of the JCPS cluster are also central to our work, Chair, so we've taken these into account, and some of the focus areas that have been identified by the cluster for this financial year include the restoration of law and order in communities, facilitating legislative reform to strengthen the criminal justice system, and also addressing the impact of socioeconomic challenges on safety and security. Chair, I'm now on slide 7, which is our emergent theory of change. So last year, Chair, we appraised the committee on the development of our emergent theory of change to strengthen our 5-year strategy, and also to clarify how our planned outcomes and interventions are expected to lead to that envisaged impact statement outlined on the slide of ensuring that communities are and feel safe. So the slide simply depicts the logical framework for the theory of change, demonstrating how our envisaged pathways, or rather the envisaged pathways from the outputs that are articulated in this APP in relation to the planned outcomes leading towards the attainment of the 5-year impact, which is also aligned to the impact as envisaged in the MTSF. Chair, I'll now move to slide 8, which are our key achievements for 2022-23. Chair, so in terms of progress in implementing our 5-year strategic plan, the progress we've made in terms of our outcomes, we have achieved both of our MTSF targets well ahead of the end of the 5-year period, which is the finalization of the ICVPS, as I indicated, and also the conclusion of a perception survey, which assesses the experiences of the public on the quality of services that are rendered by the police. So the survey focused on police visibility in the top 30 police stations, and also the percentage of victims that are satisfied with their interaction with the police, as the MTSF indicators required us to do. With respect to our progress on our outputs, Chair, I will simply highlight here that we have developed the second draft of the National Policing Policy. And this policy provides policy direction in terms of responding to the current policing, crime and violence challenges in the country. We've also continued with training of CPFs across the 9 provinces, in municipalities across the 9 provinces. And we've also concluded various studies as part of our civilian oversight, monitoring and evaluation, which includes a study on the monitoring of the SAPS 13 store, focusing on the top 30 stations, and a report on the assessment of members' perception, accessibility, and utilization of the Employee Health and Wellness Program in SAPS. Chair, so from slides 9 to 11, I beg your pardon, from slides 9 to 11, as part of our planning process, we undertook an assessment of the environment within which we operate as a department, utilizing the PASTEL analysis framework. And the outcomes of this analysis were taken into account in the review and updating of our APP, and also in informing the sectoral strategic orientation, rather, for the remainder of the medium-term period. So, Chair, I won't go into all the details of the PASTEL analysis, so I will jump straight to slide 12. Thank you, Chair. So we've also zoomed into some of the developmental challenges that contribute to the performance and effectiveness of policing policy, Chair, taking into account their their direct and indirect impact on crime, criminality, law enforcement, and of course, oversight over law enforcement. So these factors present a number of complexities for policing, given that there are those challenges such as service delivery failures, which if the other clusters are unable to resolve these failures, they ultimately become policing challenges. So for example, social discontent is one of the key factors in the persistence and pervasiveness of personal and social crime and civil disobedience. And we see this playing out in communities as service delivery protests. We've also highlighted, for example, the energy crisis, wherein we've seen a rise in the opportunistic crimes that occur during the periods of load shedding, etc. So notwithstanding the complexity of these issues, Chair, these challenges, they also present an opportunity for us through the ICVPS, the National Policing Policy, and our other policy instruments to assist the police to formulate targeted interventions in response to these. I'm now on slide 13, Chair. So, Chair, we acknowledge that as a department, in order for us to successfully execute our oversight mandate, we need to have an acute understanding of the policing priorities, the changing dynamics that underpin these priorities. And so during our planning process, we invited the police to come and make an input in this regard. And that is where they indicated, as they've mentioned in their presentation, that enhancing police visibility, improving basic standards of service delivery at their frontline service points, and the thorough, responsive investigation of crime are some of the priority focus areas towards reducing crime. They've also alluded to the National Policing Strategy, which they've also presented to the committee before, which has 6 focus areas, each with clear deliverables that respond to threats against the territorial integrity and authority of the state. That also responds to the prevention and investigation of crime that threatens the economy and also threatens the well-being of communities. Through these deliverables, they also seek to enhance stakeholder management and active citizenry and ensure the capacitation of the SAPS. So they also indicated to us that in order for us to be able to support the implementation of their 2023-24 APP, we can focus on 4 key areas, which are articulated in the slide. And we have taken these into account, Chair, in terms of our planned performance for the year. For example, with the assessment of the establishment of GBV desks and assessing the status thereof, we've already started this. This will be also part of our census project for the year. We've also started in terms of facilitating implementation of the ICVPS with a specific focus of the role of CSP in implementing the strategy. And we continue, of course, collaborating with SAPS in the monitoring of the Minister's Program of Action with regard to the crime retreat matrix. Chair, I'm now on slide 14. So with respect to our priorities for the financial year, based on the direction that we've received from the Minister, the priorities that were identified at the beginning of the medium-term period do remain unchanged. Minister has just been emphasizing the fact that we need to enhance the utilization of research to benchmark with international and regional best practices in terms of policing approaches in order for us to be able to make those appropriate recommendations to the police, and we are doing that, Chair. So now I'll moving on to slide 15. So with respect to measuring our performance, Chair, here we've just sought to give the committee a clear line of sight in terms of our predetermined objectives from the start of the 5-year period to date and the levels of performance thereof. So there's been an incremental increase, Chair, in terms of the number of our predetermined objectives, of course, with the exception of what we call the COVID-19 year, which was 2021-22, where all the departments were required to reprioritize in response to the pandemic. So there we see a reduction in the number of our targets. But then again, now the number of predetermined objectives are beginning to increase once more. So with respect to 2020-21, we had a total of 29 targets and we had achieved 86% of these targets. With respect to 2021-22, we had 26 targets. We achieved 92% of these. And then with respect to the previous financial year, we had a total of 28 targets. And we envisaged in terms of pre-audited performance that we would have achieved 92% of these targets. And then, of course, now with this APP, we have a total of 30 predetermined objectives, Chair. So I'm moving on to slide 16, which speaks specifically to our performance measures. Chair, so with respect to this specific APP, we've sought to achieve greater alignment between our planned outputs and the outcomes as we've articulated them in our revised strategic plan. And we've used our emergent theory of change as a point of reference in order for us to do this. So the slide before you speaks to program 1, which is administration, Chair. So last year, Chair, we indicated to the committee that it was necessary for us to have a mechanism in place to ensure that SAPS implements our recommendations. So we are happy to report that work in this regard has started. We are embarking on a process of developing a database that consolidates all the recommendations that we've made to SAPS through our policies, through our research, and our monitoring and evaluation reports. And then the database will form an integral part of the process to enhance the role of oversight in improving policing, Chair. It's also one of the key deliverables that are outlined in the ICVPS as part of the role of the CSP. And then I've indicated that Minister has mentioned we should facilitate implementation of the ICVPS. So as a department, we will also institutionalize the strategy in the department by ensuring that all the activities of the various programs, they correlate with the role of the CSP as has been articulated in the strategy. And then in this financial year, we are going to produce 2 reports on the role of the CSP in facilitating implementation. I'm now on slide 17, Chair, continuing with program 1. We will continue, Chair, with efforts to maintain our vacancy rate at an acceptable level, which is 10%. This is in line with the public service prescripts and guidelines. And then we also continue with the rolling 5-year implementation plans of our 2 strategies that seek to enhance operational efficiencies in the department. This is the human capital strategy and the ICT strategy. And these two strategies are key to the implementation of our overall 5-year organizational strategy, Chair. And then lastly, on program 1 with financial administration, slide 18. Chair, so with finance, the plan is to maintain 100% payment of invoices from creditors within 30 days by instituting and maintaining the appropriate internal controls that we've put in place as a department. And then we will also continue to monitor expenditure against cash flow projections of the department on a quarterly basis, Chair, and monitor the trends in terms of expenditure in relation to our planned outputs to ensure that there's that level of alignment. I'm now on slide 19, Chair, which speaks to program 2, intersectoral coordination and strategic partnerships. So the focus for program 2, Chair and honorable members, will be on the implementation of the approved partnership strategy and framework, which of course is also one of the priority areas for the medium-term period. So the partnership strategy has also been translated into 9 key outputs for the financial year. The first one, establishing partnerships through MOUs. So these are the signed agreements with key stakeholders for us to collaborate with them on crime prevention initiatives. So we sign agreements with NPOs, CBOs, and faith-based organizations in this regard. And then we'll also be looking at implementation plans for those MOUs that were signed in previous years to ensure that there's an impact on the ground. We will be continuing with capacity building workshops in terms of our crime prevention policies, creating awareness of these policies across provinces in the country, and doing an assessment of those established community safety forums to ensure that they are functional. And where we identify gaps, we will, through our provincial counterparts, be providing technical assistance where relevant. And then in terms of our anti-crime campaigns, Chair, these campaigns normally emanate from the issues that are raised through the Minister's Public Participation Program. So we will be focusing on campaigns related to gender-based violence, campaigns in schools and institutions of higher learning, and also campaigns on the responsible alcohol trade in communities. On slide 20, continuing with program 2. Chair, so we will also be looking at the efficacy of community police, their compliance in terms of CPF regulations and the community policing policy. And then we will be training CPFs across provinces. The aim of the knowledge or the capacity to support policing in crime areas. And this training is in line with the MOU that we've signed with Wits University and the SASITA. On program 2, lastly, we will continue to support Ministration Program, which provides a platform for dialogue on those priority areas that have been identified by the Minister. So we also say this financial year that for each and every imbizo, we will be developing a response plan as a mechanism to that have been raised in those platforms. On program 3, legislation and policy development. Specifically with policy development, Chair, in this financial year, policy across the 9 provinces, and also gazetting the policy, the draft